Hello and welcome to the Feel Good Club podcast. I'm Emma, your host. Welcome back to the show. Or if this is your first time, thank you for joining us. Today we are going to be asking how to feel and master our energy through our breath. We're going to look at the yogic and ancient teachings of breath as a life force. We're going to look and deep dive into the neuroscience and psychology of breath and how it regulates our energy. We're going to have a little practice of a breath control practice. And I'm going to give you some weekly practices that you can bring to your day-to-day life. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it of benefit. Here's the show. Hello everybody, thank you so much for being back here. Thank you for joining me. And I hope you've all had a wonderful weekend or week so far. So today we are talking about breath, or in yoga otherwise known as pranayama, which is our life force essentially. Now there has been a lot of different subjects written about breath of late. Many different influencers or specialists under breath management. I'm sure you can name a number of different people that you've heard about breath from in most recent years. And it's for good reason. We have this amazing magical tool available to us always that can really transform our life if we become consciously aware of it. But we also have this tool that is working with us every single day that we aren't even aware of. So the breath is this amazing phenomena really that is consciously there and also unconsciously there. It works even if we control it, and it also works when we do control it. So it's a really important topic around health, around well-being, and also mastering our own energy. So we're going to look into the different perspectives of it today and why it is so important and vital being the key word, that we learn from our patterns of breath. When we think about breath as maybe just taking in oxygen, it would seem pretty normal, pretty basic to us. But from a yoga perspective, it is known as being the fourth limb on the 8-limb path of yoga. And we often think about yoga, don't we? Many of us immediately draw our minds to the movement, the stretching, the strength, the balance, the flexibility of it, and possibly even a sense of calm rides over us when we think about our yogic practice from the movement perspective. But in the classical teachings, the physical practice of yoga, the asana, was never really the destination. It was this preparation, this tool that was pieced together in order to prepare the body to deepen into the mind state. And in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the breath, or the control or the restraint of breath, is also linked towards this fourth limb that is known as pranayama. And it follows on from these observances and social observances and personal practices that we learn to build on this 8-limb path. The first being the yamas, the second being the niyamas, and the third, the asana, the movement. We then move into the fourth limb, step by step, known as pranayama. And it's almost as if in these sutras, Patanjali is saying to us, now, you've created steadiness in the body through doing your yoga postures. Let's begin by exploring something a little bit more subtle, the breath, or perhaps more accurately, prana. Prana meaning life force, the translation into life, how we fuel the body. Because in yoga, breath and prana, they're not exactly the same thing, but they are very much interlaced. The breath is the physical element that we maybe can feel, we maybe even can see moving the body. But the prana is this subtle life force that rides just upon the breath. And I often like to think of it as, if you visualize or maybe even look out your window right now, if you've got the privilege of being able to see a tree, and just look at the tree and the leaves on the tree, or imagine one, and just see the wind. See the wind just blowing and tickling the leaves of the tree. And when we can see the leaves moving, what we're really witnessing is this invisible movement of the wind, the breath. But what we're actually physically seeing in front of us is not the breath itself or the wind. We're seeing the energy and how that connects to the movement of the leaves. And in the same way, this is how we experience the breath. But as practitioners, we would say that beneath every inhale and every exhale is an invisible current of life itself. And it is that current that in a yoga perspective is known as the prana. And when this prana flows freely, we often feel vibrant, maybe focused, maybe even deeply connected to ourselves. I know I certainly do in my yoga practice when I'm really focusing on my breath, and I really guide this in my classes, is to hear the sound of your own breath so that it becomes your own inner metronome. It becomes the space between your movement and the body that you are deeply aware of. So a circus could be going on around you, but the breath remains your anchor. And when that breath sometimes becomes depleted or scattered, and life can maybe feel a little bit challenging or heavy, we might notice that also what comes with that is the fatigue, the overwhelm, maybe the brain fog, a sense of losing our mind a little bit, or a sense of constantly giving away our energy. And this is why sometimes the link between breath is also the link between our energy management. And many of us have enough time, but what we're actually lacking, and when we say there isn't enough time, what we're actually lacking is we're lacking the energy. Maybe we're waking up a bit exhausted. Maybe we don't feel that we've got enough hours in the day, and we spend the day reacting rather than responding from a place of calm, and often maybe feeling as though everyone and everything is just asking for a piece of us or taking away our breaths. But it is within yoga that we come to understand that even long before modern psychology was recognizing breath and management as essential tools, within yoga, the essential question was not how do I manage my schedule? Instead, it was, how do I manage this life force that's flowing in and out of me? Where do I allow my attention to go? Or where, more importantly, am I leaking the energy? Where am I leaking the breath? And how can I maybe cultivate it again? And it's almost like this wind analogy. You know, how do we regather the wind? Or maybe even an analogy that is useful is the energy of a river, that flow that never stops of a river unless there is something, maybe a rock or a fallen tree, that breaks that flow. We have to kind of recognize within ourselves through our breathing practices, what is it that's blocking that flow within the river? And in a yoga perspective, that prana, that life force, is actually channeled just like a river through subtle energetic pathways that are known as nadis. And you can think of them again like the river just carrying life throughout the whole of our system. And in ancient texts, we speak of, or I read of in these ancient texts, of over 72,000 nadis, but 3 are considered especially important, which are the Ida nadi, the Pingala nadi, and they join together as one for the Sushumna nadi. Now, the Ida nadi is often described as the lunar channel, and it represents this feeling of receptivity, of intuition and rest. And it is the side that supports our parasympathetic nervous system on the left. Whereas the Pingala nadi on the right is likened to the solar channel, which supports action, vitality, motivation, and outward expression. And when them two join together, the left and the right, these two nadis, when they're clear and open, a little bit like the yin and yang philosophy, when they're balanced, awareness is said to move into the Sushumna nadi, which is this central channel, which essentially is our spine, our spinal column. And that pathway of breathing fully into those channels all the way up through the spine, which is why when we do meditation or breathing, we want to lengthen the spine so that we can lengthen, make a clear connection to those nadis. So there's no fallen trees in the way, or there's no bricks or rocks that have fallen into the river. When they are balanced and clear and open, we have the best chance to bring ourselves to a state of peace, meditation, clarity. Maybe you've experienced that before and you've not even noticed. Maybe it's been a moment where you've been walking along the ocean and you've taken a deep breath in and you've sighed and you've allowed yourself to release. Maybe that was the moment where your nadis were clear and there was a free channel for you to breathe. Maybe it was when you were watching a sunset, just being consciously aware of your moment in this time, in this space, but nothing was taking your breath from you. It doesn't have to be anything extraordinary that has happened, but it's this sense of feeling profoundly settled. And that is what we would say as yoga practitioners and within the ancient text is the moment where we have balanced the prana within us. I'm going to take you through now just a little bit of a breathing practice so that you can experience it yourself. So I'd like to invite you to a short practice known as box breathing within modern neuroscience. But in yoga, we would know this as Vritti pranayama, which is the same equal inhale and exhale. And we're going to do it for 4 counts in and out. But we're also going to add in what is known as kumbhaka, which is the retention breath. So we're going to hold the breath for 4 counts after the inhale. And we're going to hold the breath in the space after we exhale. Now, if you've never done this type of breathing before, please make sure you feel well enough to do so. Or maybe do it first with a qualified teacher on this. But if you are a regular practitioner of this, then you're welcome to try and join along now with me. And if it is something new to you and you maybe don't feel quite ready for it, or maybe there's a health condition today, you can just carry on breathing as normal. It's still going to reap the same benefits, just maybe take away the retention breath in between the inhale and the exhale. So just begin to arrive in a comfortable spot. Just notice where your body is making contact with either a chair, the floor, or the earth beneath you. And let your shoulders just soften, relax your jaw, unclench it. And if you feel okay and you're comfortable, just maybe close your eyes. And just with this next breath. Feel it coming in. And then on the exhale, just feel it coming out. Gently inhale through the nose for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now pause and just softly hold the breath for 4, 3, 2, 1. And then fully exhale. 2, 3, 4. Let the shoulders soften. Into the belly. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Now inhale, let the belly expand. 2, 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3, 4. Exhale slowly through the nose for 4, 3, 2, 1. At the end of the exhale, pause again. 2, 3, 4. And then inhale. 2, 3, 4. Pause. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And pause. 2, 3, 4. Now just let your breath return back to its natural rhythm. Just noticing it coming in and coming out. And even only after just a few rounds of breath, maybe just notice, how does your body feel compared to a few moments ago? Perhaps nothing changed. Maybe everything changed. Maybe you're just simply more aware of how busy the breath was all along. Whatever you've noticed is enough. Just the fact that you're noticing is the point of it, really. And this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love studying psychology alongside yoga. And it's that I'm constantly seeing these ancient teachings reflected in modern psychology and neuroscience. And, the yogis, they didn't have these really sophisticated, intelligent brain scanners or labs. But what they did have was careful observation, and they noticed, when the breath became steady, that the mind often followed. And in today's modern medicine, we're really now beginning to understand why. And one of the key players in that is the vagus nerve, which is the longest cranial nerve in the body, and really an important part. We're realizing more and more now that the parasympathetic nervous system, which is often described as the rest and the digest, or the rest and restore response, it creates a remarkable conversation between the brain, the heart, the gut, the gut brain, and the lungs, and many of our other internal organs. And when we're rushing through the day, breathing quickly and shallow, our nervous system often interprets that as a sign that, there's a lion in the room, something's going wrong, so we've got to be prepared. Our heart rate needs to increase. We've got to release the cortisol, the stress hormone, to prepare us to fight or survive. And then our attention starts to narrow just onto the things that are essential for us in that moment. And essentially what we're doing through that vagus nerve and through the breath is we are preparing to protect ourselves. But what's happened is, over time, we've maybe faced those sensations, that heightened ability, too many times in a day, because we're constantly being called to action, whether that be through our personal life, the to-do lists, or the deadlines and demands of our professional lives, that we've got too much on the plate. And the plate is starting to fall and smash. Several of them are no longer spinning. So the body receives that with the breath that is heightened, or maybe even shallow, it's starting to shut down, as a survival response. But what we can do, because we know those things aren't necessary for us to survive, whether we've dropped a couple of plates or not, what we can do is recognize in those moments, maybe I'm not actually breathing. Maybe I've held on to my breath. I do it every now and again when my to-do lists have got a little bit too long. I'll find myself writing and I've stopped breathing. Now, of course, my body hasn't stopped breathing, but I have intentionally held my breath without really knowing. So I have to remind myself, take a deep breath. Let the heart rate come back down, or let it come back to its balanced state. Let the stress ride down. So when we take this intentional slow breath, particularly by allowing the exhale to become a little bit longer than the inhale, we send a very different message to the nervous system. The vagus nerve allows this little whisper to the body of, you're okay, you're safe. And then the vagus nerve wakes up a little bit, becomes a bit more active, and our heart rate begins to settle. The muscles start to soften, the shoulders drop, they're no longer coming up towards the ears. We're no longer curling ourselves into a ball as if we're about to need to protect our vital organs. We stand a little bit taller. The shoulders come back into the back pockets. And then with that, the body is aware that it's safe. So the mind often becomes a little bit clearer. And not because we've had to force ourselves to relax, but simply because the body no longer feels like it's having to stay on high alert. And I find something deeply reassuring in knowing that I can control all of those things. You know, we often think that peace is something that we have to think our way into, but actually what the breath tells us we can do is we can breathe our way towards it, and it can be done really, really quickly. There's a brilliant book called Breath by an author, James Nestor. If you haven't read it, I would recommend this book. It's really eye-opening actually on the effects of our respiratory system and actually how we as humans have changed our breathing over many, many years. But what James writes beautifully about is how we can influence everything from our sleep, our concentration, to all the way to our resilience, just by simply becoming better at breathing. And nasal breathing being the most profound. And we do this in our yoga practices. I actually used to breathe quite a lot through my mouth, mainly because of singing and learning different ways of singing scales. It was always easier to sip the air back in through the mouth, particularly when you've got your mouth wide open. And as a result of that, I really do believe that I've ended up with quite a lot of respiratory difficulties, whether that be post-nasal drip or even allergies. I now obviously nasal breathe primarily because of my yoga practice, but I'm now starting to also see how that's transitioning into my singing practice, is using the nasal breath so that my throat or vocal cords aren't drying out. And this is exactly what James Nestor researches within his book, is that it's shown that, very interestingly, over time, humans have actually changed our physiology, with more breath issues becoming prominent because we've been breathing so much through the mouth that we've actually changed the shape and the dome shape of our mouth. even changing the position of the jaw, which then in turn has changed the nasal passage and even the shape of our skull, because we have learnt to breathe through the mouth rather than the filtration system that is of the nose. So breathing through the nose not only helps to filter the air we're breathing in, that's why we have all of those tiny little hairs. They're not there as a problem for us or something we have to remove. They're actually there as a filtration system. It wakes the breath within the nose to be warmed up and then humidifies the air so that it's not coarse on the throat as it comes down, which obviously prevents us from drying out and reduces the workload on the lung and the heart. So actually, there is a lot of evidence now that for a long, long time, many of us have maybe been breathing in a way that is detrimental to our health. And the ancient practices of nasal breath, like we have in a yoga practice, Ujjayi Pranayama, is actually the way that we should have been breathing all along. So it's really, really interesting to look at how you're maybe breathing, even in the moments that you wouldn't normally notice, just maybe sat at a desk or going for a walk, or even when your heart rate is increasing during exercise. How are you breathing? Are you doing it through your mouth or through your nose? And just maybe see if you can start to tilt the balance into the nasal passage a little bit more, if you can, of course. Another really interesting study into breathing comes around research that has been done, and I mentioned this in the episode last week, is around heart rate variability, which is the variation in time between our heartbeats. So with inhale, we would slightly increase the heart rate, and with an exhale, we would decrease the heart rate. And it's been shown that through slow, steady breathing, it actually helps improve the flexibility of our nervous system, our ability to move between challenge and recovery with much greater ease. Particularly for our nervous system, breathing is really helping us to shift into that rest and digest state. So through deep nasal breathing and occasionally working with a longer exhale, we can really stimulate the vagus nerve and the heart rate variability to improve, to just generally support our body and our mind in a much better way, much healthier way, but also to allow us to feel that we can regulate our own energy and our own peace. And as I was preparing for this episode today, I found myself reflecting actually with what my own relationship is with my breath. And because I've come from a singing background, I've always been deeply aware of my lung capacity and my breathing, really. But it wasn't until I had a practice with my own teacher many years ago that I really understood how breath can link to our everyday perspective of life and our spirituality and how we manage our energy. And it was when he said this really simple reflection that has stayed with me for a long, long time now, which is we have been given only a finite number of breaths in this lifetime. We've all been gifted a certain amount of breaths. So why allow ourselves to waste them? Or maybe even question, why would we allow somebody to steal one of those breaths? And that has stayed with me ever since. This metaphor, this really beautiful metaphor of breath being the life force that is within me and around me always, that I have a direct control and also responsibility of how I let them come in and let them come out. And every time I remember that, it kind of changes the way that I meet the present moment. It reminds me that breath isn't just keeping me alive. It is my life. You know, it's more than just inhale, exhale. I only have so many of these coming in and coming out, you know, and not to be morbid about it, but that's the reality. You know, it's not that I should be trying to squeeze in as much as I possibly can because I'm about to lose them. It's asking, well, actually, what is the quality of how I can spend my time with these breaths? How do I want to spend the breaths that I've been given? And I don't get it right all the time. I'm not suggesting that I do. There are days where my breaths are certainly taken and they shouldn't be. And there are still very much days when I found myself holding my breath while maybe replying to an email or a message or rushing from one commitment to the next. But I certainly do find myself now noticing when my breath isn't balanced, and I just gently come back. I remember my teacher's words. So I wonder, is this really how we're meant to spend these precious breaths, you know, by just being unconsciously aware of them? Or is it something that we can all bring into our day of being very consciously aware of what am I going to allow to spend my breaths on today? How can I save the currency of my breaths? And just as I wrap up, I'm going to give just maybe a few different practices that you can take with you this week just to keep connected to this breath, this life force within you. And that would be an encouragement to either start at sunrise or at sunset, just spending 5 minutes, and that's all it takes, is just 5 minutes with your breath, creating balance. It only takes 3 to 5 minutes to change the physiology of ourselves through the breath. And if you can do it for up to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, you will notice that those benefits become part of your habits. So this week, I invite you just to spend 5 minutes each morning or each evening just connecting with your breath. Just finding a comfortable seat, allowing yourself to arrive in it, and just practice that gentle 4-part breath. An inhale, a pause, an exhale, a pause, and then allow yourself to continue. Just noticing that prana, that life force, that energy within you. And just allow it to draw up questions, you know, of what is the quality of my energy today? Or what do I want it to be? What do I need it to be today? Just allowing the breath to be a way of listening to yourself. And the other practice I would invite this week, and I'm going to be doing the same, is to use the breath when you need to let go. And that might even be a physical sigh out of the mouth. You know, when something has held tension within you or created a frustration, or maybe the expectations have just got a little bit too much, in those moments, remember your exhale. Take a long, gentle breath in and then exhale, let it all out. Just let it go. Whatever it sounds like, whatever it feels like, just keep letting it go. And keep doing that until it's not a problem anymore. It's just another action that needs to be done, or another surrendering that needs to be offered. And then similarly, in moments where you're feeling depleted, where you feel the energy has been taken, use the breath once again. Let it wake you up. Breathe in and say to yourself, I am breathing in. And then as you exhale, I know I'm breathing out. And feel the inhale being the thing that lets you receive life and vitality. And it can be grounding, but also energizing. So in those moments when you feel a little bit fatigued, just focus on the breath coming in, letting it fuel you. And finally, See if you can, as part of all of those practices, spending 5 minutes each day and using the breath to either let go or to be energized. Maybe use this gatha, which is from Thich Nhat Hanh, a beautiful teaching of when you inhale, silently say to yourself, I know I am breathing in. And when you exhale, silently say to yourself, I know I am breathing out. A really beautiful gatha that reminds us that this moment right now is where our life is actually happening. Thank you so very much for being here again. That is all from me today. And I wish you the most wonderful of breaths coming in and coming out. If this has helped you today in any way, please like and share, or share with somebody that it would benefit. I'll see you next time, next week. Thank you for being here with me. Peace out.